this is Dallin Cooper again with County 10 here with Patrick at Wind River Internet for another tech Q&A, and this time we are talking about internet security, which is really vague and nebulous, so we might go a lot of different places, and if you have questions, feel free to ask them, and we'll talk about pretty much whatever. When I hear internet security, the first things I think of are one, like I build a lot of websites, that's most of my job, and so I think of the little thing when you visit a website in the upper left-hand corner, some of them will say not secure because they don't have an SSL. And then the other thing I think of is people in Wyoming are really, really trusting, right? Like we're a very open people, and sometimes I'll ask people if I can get some like information from them, get something from one of their accounts, and instead of sending me the information because they don't know where to look for it, they will just email me their username and password, which is bad.
Yeah.
And I've learned enough to know that that's bad and like, hey guys, your stuff's going to get stolen, but I don't actually understand why it is bad. And you might know that answer better than me.
Yeah, so a good way I like explaining email as being insecure. You think it's secure because you log in with a username and password, but most email is not encrypted, and we'll talk about encryption later. So basically, if there's a bad guy sitting outside your office, they can monitor all the traffic that comes over the Wi-Fi network if they're able to get into it, and they can see all what's called plain text, which is email. So they can monitor and do a search term for user, password, credit card, whatever. They really want the good information, and they can just get it. So anything that's like super sensitive, don't send it through email unless it's like a verified encrypted email service.
Which is like really uncommon.
Yeah,
like,
I think
most people don't use a verified encrypted email service.
I think like Google to Google is encrypted, but if it goes outside of like a Google business account, it's no longer encrypted. It goes back to regular email. So it's if you're doing any kind of like HIPAA compliance for a company where you've got medical records or patient information, you want to make sure you've got some kind of a secure encrypted information transportation system. So yeah, email, plain email is not great for sensitive information.
The other thing that came to my head, and this is because this happened to me, is like I think we all know deep down that we should be careful with passwords, and everyone always says like make sure you have secure passwords and like don't use the same password for everything. I was one of those people who for a very long time blatantly ignored that advice and used the same password for everything. Like I had 3 or 4 that I would use depending on what the thing was, and I had all the people tell me like, hey, don't do that, it's not safe, and I said like, yeah, whatever, I do what I want, and I did it anyway until one of those accounts got compromised and I had to go change my password on like 98 different websites to avoid like having my credit card taken over, my bank account taken over, like all of these different things, even just like social media accounts. I got locked out of a lot of different services because they were like, hey, your password was found on this big list of compromised passwords, and it was a gigantic pain in the butt. So
it's been really nice lately because there's this monitoring of those big password lists. So I think if you use Google Chrome for your web browser, they'll tell you, like when you type in your password, be like, oh yeah, we found this account on a list, you better change it. And in Credit Karma, they monitor your credit. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But like if you have identity theft, but they'll tell you if you've got compromised accounts and your email addresses that have been compromised. Yeah, a lot of credit card companies, they do free monitoring for identity theft and stuff like that. But yeah, you want to make it's usually a good rule of thumb not to keep your password more than a year. Most places require every 90 days to change your password. And I know it can be complicated to change your password every 90 days and then to make sure you don't use the same password for everything. So there's password managers that basically are like a little vault that can store all your credentials, and they can live on all your devices. and then you only have to worry about one password that you gotta change, which I guess is a two-edged sword because like then you end up with this one thing that if people get into that, then they got everything.
Yeah, everything, yeah.
But in general, if you're careful about that, I mean, if you're using it on like your phone where you've got the face detection or a thumbprint, and you're really good about not sharing your credentials, we'll get into that next too. Password managers help a lot. We've got some. There's onepassword.com, which is OnePass, LastPass. Like I said, Google Chrome has one that's built in. Apple has one that's built in. If you use Apple products,
I'm sure if you just
there's a bunch of
Google
them.
password manager, you could find like 80 different ones that will all try to sell you something. But
Yeah.
most of them have a free version, which is fine for like the average person. Like if you aren't using it for commercial stuff. And I've started using a password manager since that whole "hey, everything you own has been compromised" situation I ran into, and it's been really handy, right? Because a lot of them, if you stay, again, you have to be careful about this, again, phone, thumbprint, and all that, but a lot of times, like when it pops up a website or something I need to log into, I can just put in my thumbprint and it'll log me in automatically, so it's like actually faster than typing in that same password over and over. So, yeah, be smart about passwords, people. That's my advice. Don't do what I did.
Yeah. Maybe we should skip ahead to the unique credentials for users real quick. So, that like I was saying before, it seems really easy to set up one account and just give that to everybody. That's probably the worst possible thing you could do, especially if you're in a work environment, because then you have people that leave the company for whatever reason, they retire, quit, or fired, and then all of a sudden they have access to everything, and then you change that one account and you have to give it to everybody else, and you're trying to track down if somebody did something, it's just bad. So in terms of like companies or even with your family, everybody should have their own account. Even like at home, if you have your own like YouTube account for the kids, they each have their own different one. Then you can set restrictions. You can look at the history and make sure they're not watching things they shouldn't be watching. And like I was saying, for the employees, same thing. You can turn off their access after they leave the company. Do not put your passwords underneath the keyboards. It's like the number one thing I see everywhere.
A sticky note on the computer
a sticky
monitor.
note on the monitor, and everybody says, "Oh, just
password.
here's the password for this computer." It's not like a door key where you make a copy of the key and everybody has a copy of the key. You want to have this unique identification for every single person to use that device or that computer network. And there's a lot of really cool things tech guys can do in terms of like what they call single sign-on, or you can use even like your Facebook or your Google account to log in, and that way you don't have to create and juggle multiple user account information. That makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of websites have that now, like to log in with social media or log in with a Google account, which
and I really like it.
handy.
I think it makes things a lot easier.
I'm like, I don't know if it's justified, but I'm always like weirdly skeptical. Like I never log into anything with Facebook because I'm always like, what if I'm giving them all these permissions to like post crap on my Facebook? And so like sometimes I'll log in with my Google account, but like I never do it with Facebook or anything else because I don't trust Facebook.
Yeah, so like if you do it with Facebook, Google, Twitter, you can go into your settings and you can see what they call third-party access, and it'll list all the websites that have access and what kind of access they have. So like if you authenticate with Facebook, you give it permission to like look at your friends and all this other stuff, or your location, where you're at. You can deny that for certain third-party apps, but if you're purposely using like Google for maps, you do want it to know where you're at because you're trying to get that information from where you are. Mm-hmm. And you can choose who you share it with. Like Apple's really big on not sharing your data and keeping it all secure within the device that you're using. Google's the exact opposite. They're really big on taking your data, putting it in the cloud, sharing with advertisers. That's how they make all the money. Same with Facebook, targeted ads.
I just kind of like accept that I've sold my soul to Google at this point. And I've just kind of embraced it. I don't know if that's the right answer, but
The way I see it is a couple things. One, what is it? If your product is free, then you are. If the product is free, then you are the product.
yeah.
Yeah. So they're making the money off of you, and you just got to remember that nothing is really free. And also, I mean, how important is your data? Like, they're literally watching, millions and millions and millions of people all the time. They're not really going to care what if you're in Riverton or Inlander. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
They're just trying to sell you ads.
Yeah. And I feel like most people kind of have the mindset of like, okay, so if I look at shoes and then you start giving me a bunch of ads for shoes, like that's a little bit creepy, but it's also kind of convenient because now I can see more shoes. So there's kind of like some quality of life to the creepiness. I think where a lot of people really struggle is when it's like, hey, like I just kind of sold your email to like these guys, and now you get 80 emails a day for things you never signed up for, which I know is like sketchy at best and illegal at worst.
Yeah. So one of the things you can do if you don't want people to know exactly what you're up to, not that you're doing anything illegal, but you just don't like people spying on you, is you can use a VPN. So it's a virtual private network, and there's random ones that you can use that kind of split up where you're at. You can use it if you want to watch like BBC shows that aren't out in America yet. You can pretend that you're over in Europe.
Yeah,
that's kind of handy.
I had if you ever go to China, right, you pretty much have to use a VPN to like function because there's the Great Firewall of China where they censor like everything. So that was my first exposure to VPNs. It's like if you want to get on Google or on Facebook or talk to people or really do anything that isn't use the Chinese apps, like you had to have a VPN, which if you aren't a Chinese citizen is legal, but if you are a Chinese citizen is not.
Yeah.
And the premise is that it pretends you're someone or somewhere else, right?
Right. So it's a I'm trying to think what the acronym is, but it's making a tunnel through the internet. So it goes from your computer to another computer, and you start using that internet access from that other computer or server. And the primary use for VPNs, and we use them all over the place with businesses, is to connect your offices together. So if you have like a Riverton office and a Lander office, you do a VPN tunnel, and then all your local traffic is the same. So you can have your phones from one location and the other location on the same extensions. You can print from the printers in different offices. You can have access to the server and the shared files and the program database. So that's primarily what we have as a work VPN, connect you back to work if you're working from home. And that's the most common practice and the real intention of the VPNs. But it's kind of gotten to the point where people are a little bit paranoid on so much is spying on, so many companies are spying on them. They'll use VPNs just to kind of randomize what you're doing on the internet because they don't want to have people selling them shoes after they bought a pair of shoes for the next 9 months.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people, perhaps myself included, who now use them for less, like, again, not illegal things, but like workaround things.
Yeah.
I mean, like, oh, this football game is blocked in your area because you're local. It's like, well, let's just pretend I'm in Ohio or whatever.
A really good thing I'd recommend using VPNs for is if you're on a public Wi-Fi network with no password. So I was talking about earlier how email's not secure. Like if you're in an airport and the person next to you is also on that same Wi-Fi network, they could potentially see your email if they knew a little bit about hacking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're using a VPN, you can encrypt that internet information back to like your home office or your house or one of these third-party places that host VPNs, and then it's secure. So then if you're trying to do like bank transactions and things, I would recommend if you're on a public network, use a VPN if you're going to be doing anything like that needs to be secure.
That is good to know because I don't do that and I should.
Yeah, there's a lot of public hotspots and things like coffee shops and stuff like that where you'd probably want to use a VPN if you're doing anything with sensitive information.
So I have a question. So Rita wanted to know, how can I tell if someone else is using my Wi-Fi? So is there a way to tell if somebody's using your secure Wi-Fi? If somebody
Yes. Yeah. So here at Winter Internet, we have managed routers and an app, a minimum. So you just log into that and you can see all the devices that are connected to it. And if there's a device on there that you know you don't have, that's a good way to tell if somebody's connected to it. You can also see the Wi-Fi signal and how strong it is. So if you've got a weird looking device with a weak signal, that means it's, it might be somebody that's outside of your house in the parking lot, or your neighbor siphoning off your internet. And you'll see the name of it too. So if it's named somebody that's not in your household, you'll be like, oh, it's time to change my Wi-Fi password.
And that probably falls under that same thing. Like, I mean, a lot of people hand out their Wi-Fi password to people that come in their house and use it, but then how often do you change that, and are you checking your Wi-Fi and being like, oh shoot, like 80 people have my Wi-Fi password and they just stay connected to it.
Right, so it's a good idea to do a guest network. So most routers have this option. Not all of them do. Some of ours do and some of ours don't, that we've had here at Wind River Internet. But you can set up it's cool, it's a guest network, so it's actually a separate network. So the people that join your guest network don't have access to your personal computers, shared files. Like I was talking about before, the traffic's actually separate, so they can't see like emails if they were hacking and stuff like that. And you can change that guest password every month, and you wouldn't have to worry about changing it on every single device in your house every month. So that's a really good thing to do, is set up a guest network. Most routers have it as an option.
Should look into that. Other questions, or are we continuing on?
One person did ask if there's ever gonna be a tower in Fort Washakie.
Okay, so we have a lot in Fort Washakie. I'm trying to think in my head real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got like 7 in Fort Washakie. They're not big.
Yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. They're not tall. They're not huge. The way that our internet service works is we do a lot of littler repeaters or towers to get service out to people. So if we need to know like exactly where you live, so if you call and have us check.
Because isn't that where you just added 2 new ones?
Yes,
last week.
We just added 2 new ones next week, so we might have one now where you're asking about it we didn't before.
Very good.
So I guess the last question, I think, is if you are someone who hasn't done all of these things internet security wise, and you're sitting here listening to us being like, wow, I have broken all of these rules, I've been super insecure, and something does happen, right? Like your accounts are compromised, your identity is stolen, pick a thing. I don't know how bad of a thing you want to pick, but something goes wrong. Like, how do you fix it?
It can get really complicated really fast. A lot of stuff is fairly simple. Like if somebody takes your credit card information, this isn't necessarily internet related, but it may be that somehow they got your all your credentials of your credit card and they start using it. I had this happen to me personally. It might have been a credit card skimmer too. There are these little devices they'll put on ATM machines, and they just collect everybody's credit card numbers. I could see it in my history. I looked at my bank account because I check it every day, and I was like, what the heck? I'm like, why am I buying gas? I don't drive a car that uses gas. But and I'm not in Arizona. I'm in Riverton, Wyoming. And you could see this person traveling from Arizona to Las Vegas, going to the Circus, going to the carnival there or whatever. And they went to a photo booth. I was like, oh, come on. The cops got to be able to figure out who this is. They had a picture taken. But what I did is I just contacted the bank. And they could see, obviously, I had other transactions where it really wasn't. They went ahead and they reversed those transactions. You want to make sure you have protection on your debit account. Sometimes it's limited to like $300 a day. So you could be responsible for more than that. Credit cards usually have much higher protection limits for identity theft. You want to cancel that credit card immediately, or the number, and they'll send you a new one. That's for credit cards. And then it can get really bad if they get like your social security number and they start buying things. A good one to look at is creditkarma.com. It's totally free, and they'll monitor 2 of the credit bureaus, and they also do monitoring of like passwords and a couple other things. And they'll send you alerts. They'll be like, did you just do this or that? Yeah, like I think a lot of the credit card fraud departments, they'll detect like if you buy gas, at 2 different locations at the same time in the same day, they'll shut off your card. And sometimes it'll happen if you're really traveling, so you have to call and be like, hey, this is really me. I just got a lead foot and I could make it between 3 states in one day.
I had to try to pay for our honeymoon like 4 times because every time I tried to pay for it, the credit card was like, no, like fraud. And I was like, no, I just want to go on vacation, I promise. But that's better than the alternative, right?
Yeah.
It's better to have to call and say like, no, this is really me, than to have somebody who isn't you spending all your money.
Oh yeah,
so,
yeah.
Err on the side of caution there.
Unfortunately, you got to be on the fence on the identity theft thing, and just you have to monitor it really, and look out for it happening to you. If it starts, it's really hard apparently to. I've never had it like fully other than just a bank card stolen. I haven't had the whole social security number used and everything. That can get really difficult to prove and take a long time to get fixed. Yeah. Also open to answers too, not just questions. If it's happened to anybody here, let us know.
Yeah.
What you had to do to
Sure.
get that fixed.
Do we have more questions or no?
No.
I feel like this one is less question easy. Our topic this week is like less easy to have questions.
Well, last week it was mostly about Wind River Internet Service. People were just like right on it,
Yeah. And this one's like, I don't know, it's a lot of like really heavy text stuff. I feel like it's more like a seminar.
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
Here's a lesson.
It's more of a lecture.
My other thought on this, again, like, if you are ever buying something on the internet, right, and this can kind of go back to the scams one that you guys did, look in, it's very prominent on Chrome, and I'm sure most other browsers as well. Look in the top left-hand corner where the URL is. You want to see a little lock, right, by the website saying that it's encrypted. There are higher grade ones that will even say like the company name by it, that says like, yeah, for real, this is Amazon or whatever. But if there is ever not a lock, or the little lock is unlocked and it says not secure, be cautious.
Yeah, don't enter in sensitive information in that site.
Just being on the website is probably fine. If you're just like, oh, I just want to read this article, nothing bad is going to happen. But like, do not don't buy something. Don't enter your credit card information there. That is like just a surefire way to get in trouble.
Something I want to add about scams that I saw after we did that show, something that's been going around is people have been asking these sensitive security questions on Facebook all of a sudden. Like, and they're getting a little bit creative about it. Like, my wife was pointing one out where they were asking for your mother's maiden name, but in a real creative way. They didn't say, what was your mother's maiden name? They say something like, who was your mother's father's last name, or something weird. They phrase it different. And then there was another one that I saw where like, post the street that you grew up on.
Yeah, there's
Those
a lot
are
of
security questions.
There's a lot of the little games, right? Where it's like, it'll be like, oh, what's your superhero name? And it'll be like, take your birthday and your birth month and the street you grew up on, and like put them together, and that's your superhero name. And it's like, oh dear goodness, guys, like, no, do not do this.
Yeah, those are probably
quizzes.
Yeah, those are probably botnets from somewhere nefarious that post those, and people see them and like, oh, that's funny. That's how I make up my my rap name or whatever. Like, oh, those are answers to security questions. That's what they use to break into accounts. Two-factor authentication.
Oh yeah, that's a thing.
So, so because passwords have been so easy to break, there's a lot of other security measures that companies have been using to verify that you're you. And a lot of times they use your IP address, which is the unique ID that you get when you log onto the internet, and your location is tied to that usually. Mm-hmm. And so if you're logging in from this from a different location than you normally do, sometimes they'll ask you to go through this secondary authentication process, and they'll ask you to verify an email if they email to you or text you a code, or they'll ask you one of those security questions like, you know, what was your first dog's name, or, you know, what street did you grow up on, what was your first grade teacher, which apparently are just going around like crazy on Facebook. Do not answer those.
And everybody does.
And everybody
All
does,
my
yeah.
friends, they go through that whole long quiz
Yeah.
that has a million questions, and they're all for security answers pretty much. And people keep saying, don't do those quizzes. Like, don't answer those questions, but people still do it. They think it's fun. So.
I mean, it is fun, and some of them might have actually been legit, but a lot of them now really are all the security questions.
Another one that, and this probably is more just the scam thing, but I saw it like last week, and it kind of blew my mind because my parents are not the most tech savvy people out there, and my mom was like, so I got this email and I'm fairly sure it's a scam, and it was an email, it, you know, said it was from Netflix, the email address was like at netflix.com, and it was like, hey, your subscription has lapsed. Click this button, make sure your payment information is up to date, and renew your subscription. And she was like, how do I know if this is legitimate or not? I assume it's not because I don't think I have a Netflix account.
Oh, man.
And I was like, well, if you don't have a Netflix account, it's a scam, right? She's like, yeah, but what if I did like a free trial or something at one point and I like forgot about it, and so obviously it was a scam because she didn't have a Netflix account. But a lot of people have Netflix accounts. And if you got that email, you would think like, oh, did my credit card expire at some point, whatever. And if you click the button, it immediately took you to like a very sketchy website. The URL was not Netflix. Like it redirected you a bajillion times.
Yeah,
and
that's
bad,
something else to point about email. When they made it, they didn't think of all these things that people would be doing with it. Mm-hmm. But it's very easy for people to just put pretend to be any email address.
Yeah.
So you can put for send from and be like totally legit, you know, like security at, you know, mybank.com, and the email will say that and it'll look like it's from them, but once you click on it, that's when, you know, you'll pop up on a website that might have mybank.biz or something instead
of
a
different URL. Yeah, so
or
checking the website and also looking for like really clear typos. Scammers aren't well known for their advanced linguistic skills. So
a lot of times they're foreign, so they don't. English isn't their first language.
If you read something and you think like that just doesn't sound quite natural, like it probably isn't.
And if it's too good to be true, it usually is.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think. I think that's what made that one so effective, right? Is that it wasn't making any big promises. It was just like, hey, your information needs updated, which is a thing that happens like a lot for, I mean, payment and billing and stuff. So a very legitimate sounding email scam. I was kind of impressed. Don't do email scams.
Are we?
Is that
nobody asking for if they can get internet somewhere?
No, actually, I think people were just listening intently.
We're just so engaging, you know, talking about cybersecurity.
I've learned a lot of stuff today, just saying.
Yeah, so we were up late last night setting up a link into Sinks Canyon for Oakley Boycott and her performance that she's doing. So if you want to see that, that's live and streaming right now.
Is that just on your Facebook page?
You know,
or where?
That's a good question. She's got it on her Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah. But there was no in where the sinks where the water goes. There's no internet. There's no cell phone signal. So we had to do some creative things and bounce them around and actually shoot through a little canyon about 40 miles. But it worked.
I don't know why someone hasn't thought to put an internet connection in that small cave yet. I mean, it's clearly a prime target for internet.
Yeah.
We need more cave internet. All right. Well, cool. Thanks for tuning in, and if people continue watching these, we'll continue making them because I think they're a lot of fun and I learn a lot. So, if you have a topic that you think would be helpful or useful for us to talk about, throw it in the comments or send a message to either Wind River Internet or County 10, and we'll try to talk about it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.